Even if he was barely exceeding the speed limit, every other car on the road was passing him, so Stuart wanted to know why he was the one getting a goddamn ticket. In response, the officer then had him get out of his car and take a field sobriety test, followed by a warning that he was this close to getting himself arrested. In the middle of this, Stuart lucked out when the officers suddenly recognized his name. The man was a fisherman who'd read 2 of Stuart's books and loved them. Apologizing and somewhat mollified, Stuart explained that he was still reacting to a terrible fight that he'd had with his wife, that he was coming up to his mountain retreat to get his head straight. The cop still gave him a speeding ticket, but then he'd gotten his autograph and let him go. But now he'd been up here for 2 days, and his head didn't feel any straighter. In fact, if anything, he had grown more angry, frustrated, and depressed at the realization that his 22-year-old marriage to his charismatic, brilliant, difficult, headstrong, and still pretty orthopedic surgeon wife, Caryn, seemed to be over. In almost every imaginable way, they had grown apart. Her thriving practice, her investments, and the new medical office she was starting with her business partners had taken almost every spare minute of her life for the past couple of years. Now, with the purple dusk gathering around him, Stuart looked out over the water and saw a few more promising signs of trout feeding, but he couldn't even bring himself to move from where he sat to throw his line. His mind refused to leave the familiar rut it had been plumbing since he'd come up here. How could his life with Caryn have come to this? They'd met when he'd been a guide on a Snake River rafting trip her parents had given her for a graduation present. He had been 28 to her 22, and they were soulmates from the minute they'd laid eyes on each other. She was going to med school at Stanford in the fall, but nothing was going to stand in the way of their being together. Stuart moved from Wyoming out to California, and they were married in the second week of November. In those early days, their lives complemented one another. Caryn studied round the clock. Stuart submitted his writings everywhere he could think of and augmented his meager writer's income by working as a word processor in the law offices of Jed Conley, one of his friends from college. At home, Stuart kept the apartment clean, made their dinners, did the dishes, quizzed Caryn on her classes. She read and helped him edit his articles and early manuscripts and took every chance to get into the wilderness with him. The Bay Area was good for that. They jogged together 3 or 4 times a week, talking the whole while. They liked the same music, the same books. They laughed at the same jokes. Busy lives notwithstanding, they found time to make love often. They would often brag to each other that in the history of the world nobody had ever been as happy as they were. If that had been true then, Stuart thought, then now there were few, if any, couples as miserable. On Friday, the fight had erupted when Caryn came home for lunch after her hip replacement patient had caught a cold and canceled on her at the last minute. So her entire afternoon loomed open and free, and when she got home, she was in a foul humor. Stuart, who'd been planning to drive up to Echo Lake anyway and get some writing done, suggested that she take advantage of the unexpected opportunity and accompany him. She had no interest. No, she didn't have other plans. But why would she want to come up to his cabin for an entire weekend? What did he think they would do that she would remotely enjoy? Another hike? She'd done her share of Stuart's hikes. 8 or 10 or 15 miles up and down steep and difficult terrain. 2 or 3 or even 6,000 vertical feet in one day. Wow, what a good time that was. And all to accomplish what? To get some outdoor exercise or a variation of a nice view that they'd both already seen 1,000 times? She'd pass, thanks. She'd outgrown all of that. He had offered to stay down in the city then. Maybe they could go out to dinner or even eat at home. Get some overdue and richly deserved quality time together. Maybe reconnect. "You mean sex?" she'd asked. That wouldn't be the worst idea in the world, but I wasn't just thinking of sex. No surprise there. What does that mean? The thing heating up between them. You haven't thought of sex at all in a couple of months, Stuart. I've thought of it all right, Caryn. It's just never been at a good time for you. Oh, so it's all my fault. After which, it had gotten ugly fast. Caryn finally admitting that she was sick of the sham marriage between them. Kimberly, their incredibly